When people think about gambling in California, they usually picture Las Vegas a few hours away in the desert, or the Native American casinos that exist today. But long before those options, there was a brief and wild chapter when Southern California tried to build its own version of Las Vegas, not on land, but floating just off the coast of Los Angeles. At the center of it all was one man, Tony Cornero, a gambler, bootlegger, and businessman who became known across the city as the Admiral. His floating casinos promised glamour, excitement, and quick money. But just like many LA dreams, they burned bright and fast before being crushed by the weight of politics, law enforcement, and relentless opposition. Tony Cornero's story starts years before he became the face of offshore gambling. Born in Italy in 1899, Cornero immigrated to the United States as a child and settled in Southern California. Like many young men of his generation, he was ambitious but restless, looking for opportunities wherever he could find them. When Prohibition hit in 1920, banning the sale of alcohol, Cornero found his opportunity. While the government tried to dry out the nation, he made a fortune smuggling Canadian whiskey into California. He became one of the region's most successful rum runners, running his operations with sharp business instincts and just enough boldness to stay ahead of the law. By the time Prohibition ended in 1933, Cornero was already a wealthy man, but with bootlegging gone, he needed a new hustle. He turned to gambling. At the time, California law prohibited casinos on land, but Cornero noticed a loophole. State jurisdiction ended 3 miles off the coast. Beyond that point, it was considered international waters. If he could anchor a ship outside the 3-mile limit, he could technically run a legal casino, at least by his interpretation. And with that, the idea of the offshore gambling ship was born. In 1938, Cornero launched his crown jewel, the SS Rex. The Rex wasn't just a barge with a few tables slapped together. It was a 300-foot luxury liner, fully outfitted with gambling rooms, fine dining, live music, and all the trimmings of a Vegas casino, before Vegas was even Vegas. Cornero spared no expense making it look and feel first class. The ship could host up to 2,000 gamblers at once, offering blackjack, roulette, craps, slot machines, and high-stakes poker. For those who didn't want to gamble, there were bars, orchestras, and shows. The Rex quickly became a floating nightlife hotspot. To get there, passengers took small ferries from Santa Monica or Long Beach out to the ship, where they were greeted by tuxedoed staff and led into lavishly decorated rooms. Hollywood stars, businessmen, politicians, and thrill seekers all made the trip. It was seen as glamorous, rebellious, and exclusive. LA's social scene buzzed with stories of nights spent at sea where fortunes were won and lost under the glow of chandeliers. But not everyone saw the Rex as harmless fun. Law enforcement, politicians, and religious groups despised it. Reformers argued that the floating casinos were dens of corruption that attracted organized crime. Local officials worried about violence, vice, and the perception that Los Angeles was tolerating lawlessness just offshore. Governor Colbert Olson, in particular, wanted the ships gone. He saw them as an embarrassment to the state, openly mocking California law from just 3 miles away. For a time, though, Cornero held his ground. He insisted the Rex operated legally, and he dared authorities to try stopping him. He argued that he wasn't violating state law because his ship sat outside California's waters. He even took legal steps, filing motions to prove his case in court. But while the legal arguments dragged on, pressure was building for the state to take direct action. That action came in 1939, in what would become one of the most dramatic clashes in California's gambling history. Governor Olson ordered a full raid on the Rex. Hundreds of deputies and state officials boarded boats and headed out to sea, determined to shut the ship down once and for all. Cornero wasn't about to go quietly. When the officers tried to climb aboard, his crew turned fire hoses on them, blasting them back into their boats. For hours, the bizarre standoff played out on the Pacific. Onlookers from the Santa Monica Pier and the beaches could see the confrontation unfolding, watching streams of water spray down as the authorities struggled to gain control. Despite Cornero's resistance, the state eventually cut the ship's anchor lines and towed the Rex back to shore. The raid was a turning point. Once the ship was in port, officials seized equipment, closed down operations, and fined Cornero heavily. He fought in court for years, but by then the damage was done. The glamour of offshore gambling had turned into a messy legal and political battle that he couldn't win. The Rex wasn't the only ship affected. Other gambling barges that had popped up along the coast were also shut down, victims of the crackdown. Fires and mysterious damages plagued some of them, fueling rumors of sabotage, rivalries, and backroom deals. But the real death blow was the state's determination to make an example out of Cornero and his empire. By the early 1940s, the offshore gambling era in Los Angeles was finished. For Cornero, the end of the Rex was both a setback and a turning point. He didn't disappear from the gambling world. Instead, he set his sights on Nevada. Las Vegas at the time was just beginning its rise as America's gambling capital. Cornero invested in casinos there, hoping to replicate his success on land. In the late 1940s, he helped build the Stardust, which would become one of the most famous casinos in Vegas history. But he never fully escaped his reputation as the man who had tried to outwit California on the high seas. Tony Cornero's life ended as dramatically as it had been lived. In 1955, while playing craps at the Desert Inn in Las Vegas, he collapsed and died of a heart attack at the table. Even in his final moments, he was surrounded by dice, chips, and the thrill of the gamble. Looking back, the story of Tony Cornero and the Rex is more than just a quirky episode in LA history. It's a window into a time when the city was still defining its identity, caught between its glamorous image and its struggles with vice and law enforcement. The Rex symbolized ambition, risk, and the lure of quick fortune, qualities that have always been part of Los Angeles' story. But it also showed how fragile those dreams could be when they clashed with power and politics. Today, if you stand on the Santa Monica Pier and look out over the water, you won't see any floating casinos. But in the late 1930s, those waters were home to a floating palace of gambling, music, and spectacle, run by a man bold enough to challenge the state of California from just 3 miles offshore. The Rex didn't explode and it didn't sink. It was simply dragged back to shore, dismantled, and erased from the horizon. But its story lives on, a reminder of a forgotten moment when Los Angeles almost became the world's gambling capital at sea.